Welcome to Hyperion Gaming. I'm Hyperion, and today's video is about the two new commanders that have just dropped in Rise of Kingdoms. They're both leadership commanders. One will be available on the wheel, and the other one will be available in the Mightiest Governor event. Let's look at the first one here, Suleiman. Now, he's going to be leadership, conquering, and attack. He'll be available in the Mightiest Governor, and he looks like he's going to be a pretty niche commander. I'm thinking he's really only going to have one strong pair, but I could be wrong. We really have to test him to see how he performs. But on paper, it looks like he's got one real pair right now. Now, before we dive into these skills, keep in mind that with leadership commanders, if you're going to be doing rallies especially, you need to have the right gear. Start looking at having leadership special talent on your equipment. It's going to make a big difference if you get hit by somebody who's got all special talents and you don't. So just food for thought there. All right. His first skill is going to be dealing direct damage up to 1300 damage factor. And when the target has less than 50% rage, it decreases their defense by 10% and their health by 10% for 2 seconds. At face value, I don't like that skill. Just looking at it as it is, I'm not a big fan of it. But the more I look at it and think about who I'm under the impression will be a good pair, which we'll get into pairs a little bit later, it may work out okay, but the damage factor for the skill is pretty low. The reduction in health and defense, that's huge. It's 60% total stats. 2 seconds is kind of short. And the biggest problem I have with it is when the target has less than 50% rage. I'm not crazy about that condition that has to be met there. Troops led by this commander gain up to 15% attack and defense. Damage taken from all sources is reduced by up to 10% when outside of Alliance territory. You know, really, this is kind of sad. I mean, 15% attack and defense, you're talking epic commander levels of bonus there. That's not impressive. And 10% damage reduced, again, not great. I mean, that could definitely be better. That skill being so unimpressive is making me think either this commander is literally just designed to be a placeholder and he's going to underwhelm everybody and they just had to put something out, which usually isn't the way Lilith does things. They, regardless of how anyone feels about the company, they typically put a lot of thought into their commanders for the most part. Obviously, they miss things like anybody. No one's perfect. But there's typically a lot of thought put into how their stuff is balanced. Very rarely, do you have like the Attila situation where it just comes out and you can't do anything about it for a while. So that being so low, it makes me think this guy might be better than what he looks like on paper, at least so far. His third skill, attacks have a 10% chance of reducing the normal attack damage of target troops by up to 20% and the same up to 20% for a skill damage reduction for 3 seconds when attacking cities or strongholds. That's a pretty good skill. I'm liking that one. That one is much better. That's pretty strong. I mean, that's a big amount of reduction. You're looking at 40% of stats and over 3 seconds. It doesn't sound like a lot maybe, but yeah, that one looks pretty promising. His fourth skill, troops led by this commander deal up to 5% normal attack damage. That's not that great, but if he's designed to be paired with who I believe he should be, then it makes sense that they did that. If at least 2 different unit types are present, troops also gain up to 50% increased skill damage for 3 seconds upon taking skill damage with a cooldown of 5 seconds. So the 5-second cooldown is probably necessary because if you were to swarm him, that might get kind of crazy. But I really wish that cooldown was like 3 or 4 seconds. 5 seconds to me seems kind of long. But that's one of those things that have to be tested to see how it performs. All right, and then his expertise skill, It's a new skill, so it's adding to what's already there. It's not enhancing anything. When the commander has over 70% rage, normal attacks by troops led by this commander inflict additional skill damage to the target, damage factor 200, but grant the target 50 extra rage. Now, I'm not a big fan of giving more rage to who you're attacking, and 70% rage, that's a pretty high threshold. This skill directly correlates with what I'm seeing, though, this trend throughout his skills, that he's almost custom designed to pair with somebody. And we'll get into that after we go over their overviews. But overall, just alone, I don't like him. Just his skills by themselves, I'm not impressed. They're really not that impressive. And I don't think anyone will get great results with him if they don't pair him properly. And you're definitely going to want to have the right equipment for him, special talented with leadership to use him. So at any rate, he's going to really need 2 troop types to be at his most effective level, to get the most bang for your buck, if you will, out of him. I mean, 50% skill damage is a lot. It might not seem like it's ideal to have 2 troop types, but yeah, that's a big amount of skill damage bonus for 3 seconds, 50%. Especially if you pair him with who I think he's designed to. I think he's custom tailored to be paired with him, and is the other new commander, Honda. Now, it's odd that Honda is the versatility commander and Suleiman is the conquering commander, and I strongly feel that Honda needs to be primary when you're using them together and doing a rally. And the main reason, obviously, is going to be his first skill, which deals direct damage up to 3 targets in a forward-facing, fan-shaped area with a damage factor of up to 2,500 when he's primary. Now, he does have a higher rage requirement, but that higher rage requirement also works with the way Suleiman's designed, and I think that may come in handy. We'll get into that in a little bit when we come to pairing. So you can use him secondary, but you do take a reduction on the skill damage, and I really don't recommend using Honda secondary except for maybe a few niche rare occasions. His second skill is troops led by this commander gain. Now, this is something to kind of pause on for a second. If you notice, his march speed bonus in the preview starts at 3%, and here it starts at 2%. So there's obviously an error somewhere, but where it is impossible to know until we can test it or Lilith does something about it. But it'll either be march speed of 10% or march speed of 20%. I just don't know which one's which. If it is correct the way it's written down here, then 20% will mean he's got the fastest march speed buff or bonus and skills. If it's not, then he's kind of in line with everyone else. But only time will tell to know if it's 20 or 10. If it is 20, though, then that opens up possibilities for even, crazier pairings than people might think about it in the front end. Pairing them with Cao Cao could get crazy. I mean, it's only 5%. 15% is what's out now. But when you're chasing somebody or you're being chased, that 5% pays off. But then you also have extra attack is increased by up to 30%. Now that's huge and that's important because if you are not actively attacking, then that 30% is not active. If you're running away, it's not active. That is something to keep in mind that, when you're using this guy, you definitely want to be aware of how you're using him. So unless you're doing a rally where you're just there attacking, if you're using him in the open field, you need to keep a short leash on him. You need to be aware of where he is at all times because he's not going to be nearly as effective if you are doing anything other than attacking. Now, if that march speed is 20%, that definitely comes in handy, especially since you'll see later that he also wants mixed troops. So his next skill, troops led by this commander take up to 5% reduced damage, which isn't amazing, but it's 5% of reduced damage. I'll take it. An active skill cast will cause the target to suffer damage over time, so damage factor up to 200, and up to 50% reduced march speed for 2 seconds. And that can only trigger at most every 5 seconds. So This is a decent skill. I mean, the 200 direct damage factor isn't, crazy, but it's extra damage on top of what he's already doing at 2500. So, anything is just more. It's just better. Reducing march speed, that's excellent for when you're in the field. And damage reduction, that's awesome for, helping to mitigate the AoE you get when you're out and about. It applies to everything. So that's fantastic as well. I mean, it's a solid skill. His fourth skill, troops led by this commander gain up to 10% troop capacity. So, that's pretty straightforward, just how many troops you can send in the march. It doesn't really help a lot with rallies, but it's good for open field fighting. And deal up to 5% additional skill damage per every 8% of your units that you have lost. Now, that skill damage cannot exceed 60% of a bonus. So I find it interesting that they capped that like that. Makes me think that you're going to hit that pretty easy. And I don't know what it's going to be when you have 2 or more unit types. So it shows 1 to 5% with a single troop type, but it just says 5% with 2 or more troop types. So I don't know if it's going to be 5 up to 10 or 5 up to 15 or what. We'll have to see if they fix that, or when we test it, if someone expertises them pretty quickly, then hopefully those reports will be shared with everybody. And then his expertise skill, which I'm pretty excited about. I think it's pretty awesome, especially if you look him up. If you want to get a little crazy, you can look him up and see the history on this guy, and you'll know why they did this. But troops led by this commander take 30% reduced damage from normal attacks on the map. This effect can trigger up to 57 times per hour after leaving your city. So shout out to Cami from My Kingdom 1230 for telling me that there's history lesson behind that expertise skill. I didn't know that. But at any rate, so those are his skills. And when you look at him with Suleiman, I'll explain why I think they're going to be the best pair when it comes to using Suleiman for rallies. Okay, so let's go through a mock battle, real basic, but just in order of the way these skills would fire off, so you can get a better idea of how powerful this pair may be together. Because I'm starting to think, the more I look at them, the more I'm thinking these guys might be pretty darn good together. So the target is going to fire their skills first, because they're likely going to have around 1,000 rage requirement. You're going to have 1,350. Now, that's important, and that's what makes this pair so strong, is actually having the higher rage requirement, which at first doesn't look or sound good, but it actually may be the better situation in this case with these two commanders. So the enemy's going to fire their skills first. They're going to reach their rage first, and you're going to take skill damage from the opponent. That skill damage, though, is going to trigger Suleiman's fourth skill. Troops led by this commander, if you have 2 unit types, they're going to gain up to 50% increased skill damage for 3 seconds. So that's important, because 3 seconds is also around the time, the gap between when that guy, your target, the flag, the city, whatever, 3 seconds is around the time that it's going to take you to take skill damage and then Honda to rage, or to reach his rage requirement. Now, once that happens, you're going to have that 50% skill buff on top of that 2,500. So now you're looking at like around 3,750, which is really getting some big numbers there for primary skill damage. So, but there's more to it than that. It's not just that alone. This should also, let's go back to him. You're also going to see this come into play. When the commander has over 70% rage, which you will, because you're within that 3 second window, you're a couple of skills away. So you should be right there at that 70 rage mark, 70%. Normal attacks by this troop, led by this commander, inflict additional skill damage to the target. And I don't see it just says increased skill damage. It doesn't say increased additional or not. So the way I'm reading it is this should also buff that extra 200. So I think that'll take you to 300, which is, it's not crazy, but it's just more damage. Because remember, this is on top of that 3750 that we're just talking about. And I think it's going to come down to how you have Honda built with the equipment, with the talents and whatnot, and also what you're getting hit by. I think the key to this pairing is going to be when he rages in correlation to your opponent. This might be one of those commanders that he could be wicked dangerous or just okay, all down, and it all comes down to how tuned in, how dialed in you are to what you're attacking. If you're not getting the results you want, you cancel your rally and you move your gear around. This might be like your top end rally commanders, your whale of whales, if you will, and the people who are able to read the battlefield, see that they're not getting the exact result they want, and take the Horn of Fury off. Maybe you're raging too fast, or add it if you need it, But I think it's going to all come down to, or maybe not all, but a very large portion of what makes this guy and Suleiman together dangerous is when they rage, and if that 50% rage buff, triggers and takes effect while Honda's primary skill is active. Now, I could be misunderstanding something, but the way I'm reading it, if everything lines up properly, then you could get some pretty impressive buffs. But again, I could be misinterpreting something. I could have my timing off by a second or two. It can be kind of confusing because, your active skill may activate on one turn, but it doesn't actually fire off till the next turn. So we really have to see these things tested. We really have to see how exactly these skills mesh and work. But the more I read it, that's what I'm seeing. And if it does work that way, yeah, this could be one of the most powerful and dangerous rallies we've seen thus far in the game. And I think where it's really going to play a part is going to be passes, because you can only have 3 rallies on a pass. And the reason being is, I think this is almost like a trick when you see this first primary skill of Suleiman. Reducing his defense and health, I'm starting to think that's less for your rally and more to make it more dangerous for if you have a second rally. I strongly feel that the meta is shifting in the game to where you don't just need to have your one rally lined up properly, but you have to have it in sync with another rally or two, and you have to have everything coordinated properly. I feel that that's the way things are shifting, just because of the way his skills are laid out, and looking at the newest version of KVK that they are still tweaking that didn't go so well the first time they released it. But I believe that might be that there might be a shift in the meta coming. So I hope that makes sense. If you have any comments about it, please let me know. If my timing is off, feel free to let me know. It's not going to hurt my feelings. I'm just doing this off the top of my head. I could easily have something not lining up right, but that's the way I'm understanding it. And then obviously we'll see what happens when they release, and we can actually test them to get real results. Please like and subscribe. It's free for you, and it means everything to me. It's huge. I really greatly appreciate it. And until next time, I will see you guys tomorrow.